to do when you start talking?
Mm-hmm. Okay, everybody, thanks for coming. We're going to be discussing seaweed and its success with targeted weight loss and nutrition in its medical use. I don't know how many of you have heard of the alternative option that gives you a chance to get all the nutrients that you need in one sitting instead of just seeming like you're eating at one time, walking around bloated like you just ate your last supper. But seaweed would be that alternative option because it allows you to get all of that in one sitting. Now, it's not as popular in Western culture, our culture, because one, it's not easily accessible like it would be in other countries such as Asia or Japan, China, or Korea, whose primary source of food would come from the ocean with things like oysters, shrimp, or seaweed. But in American culture, it doesn't really have a taste to it. And I know down here, especially in the South, we admire seasoning in our food, so seaweed wouldn't be amongst the top of our favorite foods because it doesn't have a taste in it. It absolutely doesn't take seasoning. So, but if you do decide to eat it, just pour a little salt on it. You'll be okay. But now that you know what's going on and what we're going to talk about, we're going to move to the first point, which is the definition of seaweed. What exactly is seaweed? It actually is any of the numerous multicellular marine algae that live and grow on the salt marshes, the brackish waters, or submerged at the bottom of the ocean, which is probably the first thought that comes to your mind. The most popular type of algae is the brown algae, which is a member of the phylum Phaeophyta, and is the longest, fastest growing, most photosynthetically productive of the living organisms. And one that's a little less popular than brown algae is the red algae, which is a member of the Rhodophyta phylum, and it possesses that red pigment that gives it its characteristic color, and we're about to see it. This one right here on the left is the brown algae. I'm not really sure why they call it brown because it's green. And when it's cooked, it's that dark green seaweed that you might see in the restaurants, or if you go to the grocery store and you look at that brand name Sea Greens, under that it might say something like Rax seaweed, which is, I guess, the nickname that they use for it. But that's the most common type of seaweed that we might eat or see, in a Chinese restaurant or something here. The red algae, I'm not really sure why they call it red algae because it's more purple than red, but this is what I was talking about, that pigment that gives it its characteristic color. It contains the calcium carbonate that's found in oyster shells. For those of you who eat seafood, I'm not really a big fan, but calcium carbonate is actually really healthy for you. Okay? And I call seaweed the fountain of youth because of everything that it encompasses that helps you with your normal day-to-day nutrition value. It comes from the ocean, which is a rich and consistent growing medium. The brown seaweed, which is the seaweed that was on the left, the green seaweed, is a premadural food with no roots, and it absorbs and converts its nutrients straight from the ocean, which means a lot of the nutrients that you would get, that the seaweed gets, you would get. In other words, say you were to go to the grocery store and you were to buy pineapple or, chicken or things of that nature, half of the nutrients from the chicken that you buy at the grocery store will be gone by the time it reaches your plate. But actually with the seaweed, since it gets its nutrients straight from the ocean, it has no drying process, it has no deprivation from soil, it doesn't need any type of sunlight or anything like that, so the nutrients that come straight from the water come straight to you. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
That part makes sense.
Okay. I'm sorry. And according to Simon Ranger, who wrote an article on the nutritional value of seaweed, the annual analysis of 72 foods between 1940 and 2002 shows the average loss in percentages of the foods that we get today. And it includes an average of 19% of magnesium, 29% calcium, 37% iron, and 62% copper. And it actually shows a rise in 400% of the saturated fat in beef and chicken. That's not good at all. We don't actually need any saturated fat because that's the fat that stores up, and presents all the antioxidants and toxins and stuff from releasing the fat in your body. The saturated fat targets that for women in places around our stomach and our hips, and for men mainly just around the stomach. Seaweed contains most of the all-natural micronutrients that we are missing in all of our daily diets. So if you were to eat one of the 72 foods that are deprived of these nutrients, seaweed would probably make up, up to 47%, depending on your diet. I might need to take in more than some of you might need to take in because, some of you may be more physically active or things of that nature.
Probably not.
Okay, and I'm not sure if you can see this, but this is a table that compares, I call it water-based nutrients, which would be the seaweed, over the whole food nutrients, which is what we would get from the grocery store with things like nuts and dried raisins and grapes and strawberries and things like that. Brown rice, prunes, porridge, cabbage, and carrots, these are all the numbers of the nutrients and minerals that we get today in the food that we eat. Now, in 1940, all of these numbers that you see would have been doubled. And that just shows the, what we're getting today.
Why is that?
Because a lot of the ingredients that they had back then, they're substituting now with things like steroids and things like cellulose, and things like, high fructose corn syrup. A lot of that stuff they didn't use back then, and they're substituting a lot of that in right now.